"Do not open the door, little Omega," the voice in Emily Carter's memory whispered, "because not everything that begs in a storm is asking to be saved." The first scratch came just after midnight, soft enough to be mistaken for a branch dragging across the porch. Emily froze beside the iron stove, one hand wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, her pale fingers still aching from carrying firewood through 3 feet of snow. Outside, the Frostpine woods had disappeared beneath a white wall of wind. The windows rattled. The roof groaned. Every pine tree beyond her cabin bent like it was bowing to something terrible moving through the dark. She lived at the farthest edge of pack territory, in the last cabin before the forbidden forest, where no one came unless they wanted to leave something unwanted behind. Most nights, that unwanted thing was her. The scentless Omega. The quiet mistake. The girl no alpha could feel, no beta bothered to defend, and no ceremony ever had room for. Earlier that evening, while the rest of Frostpine gathered in the great hall for the winter moon choosing, Emily had been ordered to stack wood, scrub boot tracks from the entry, and stay out of sight. Tyler Graves, the local alpha's son, had looked right through her as if she were frost on glass. "You make the room colder just standing in it," he had said, and everyone around him had laughed because laughing at an Omega cost them nothing. Emily had lowered her eyes, taken the empty wood basket, and walked back into the storm without answering. She was good at silence. Silence had kept her fed. Silence had kept her alive. But now, in the hollow stillness between gusts of wind, the scratching came again. 3 slow marks against the front door. Not random. Not animal panic. A pause. Then 3 more. Emily set down her mug and stepped closer, each floorboard creaking beneath her socks. The old rule rose in her mind, clear as a warning bell: never shelter strange wolves during a royal storm. Frostpine law called them rogues. The punishment for hiding one was exile. The punishment for hiding more than one was worse than exile, the kind of ending no one spoke about in front of children. Emily reached the door and held her breath. Through the thin wood came a sound so small it broke something in her chest. A whimper. Not fierce. Not hungry. Pleading. She lifted the latch just enough to open a narrow crack, and the storm rushed in like a living thing, stealing the warmth from her lungs. On her porch, half buried in snow, knelt 6 wolves. Not stood. Not crouched to spring. Knelt. Their fur was white and silver with ice, their bodies trembling from cold, their breath fading in weak clouds before their muzzles. The largest one raised its head, and Emily saw eyes the color of moonlit steel. He dragged one paw across the snow-covered boards, slowly, carefully, carving 3 words with a claw that shook. "Let us in." Emily's heart hammered so hard she could hear it over the storm. 6 wolves. 6 strangers. 6 reasons for the pack to condemn her before sunrise. But behind the largest wolf, the smallest one sagged against the porch rail, barely able to keep its eyes open, and the old fear inside Emily met something older than fear. Mercy. Her hand moved before doubt could stop it. The door opened wider. Warmth spilled out across the snow. "Come in," she whispered. And the moment the 6 frozen wolves crossed her threshold, every candle in the cabin turned silver. The silver light did not flare like fire. It breathed. It shimmered across the cabin walls, touching the crooked shelves, the patched curtains, the basket of split pine by the stove, and Emily stood in the center of it with the storm at her back and 6 frozen wolves at her feet. For one heartbeat, none of them moved. Then the smallest wolf slipped on the wooden floor, its legs folding beneath it as if the last thread holding it upright had finally snapped. Emily shut the door with her shoulder and dropped to her knees. "Easy," she whispered, though her own voice shook. "You are safe for now." Safe. It was a strange word to offer when she had never owned much of it herself. Her cabin sat nearly 2 miles from the Frostpine Hall, far enough that the music from the winter moon choosing could not reach her, but close enough that she could still imagine it. The golden chandeliers. The polished boots. The daughters of strong bloodlines turning in blue and white gowns while Alpha Tyler Graves chose which one deserved to stand beside him when spring came. Emily had scrubbed that hall until her fingers went numb. She had laid the silver cups in perfect rows, swept ashes from the hearth, and carried warm cider to girls who had once hidden her shoes in the snow when they were children. They had all grown beautiful in the way Frostpine valued beauty, loud laughter, bright scents, strong wolves beneath their skin. Emily had grown quiet. Her scent had never bloomed. Her wolf was not gone, exactly, but she lived deep inside Emily like a candle behind thick glass, warm enough to feel, never strong enough to prove. That was why Marlene Carter, the woman who had raised her after her father vanished near the northern border, called her a blank page. No alpha can read you, Marlene often said. No pack can use you. Try not to become another burden. So Emily had learned usefulness in small, invisible ways. She knew how to mend a torn coat before anyone noticed it was damaged. She knew which herbs settled a fever, which roots calmed a frightened horse, which kind of touch made a crying child breathe slower. She knew how to disappear before cruel words became cruel hands. But the wolves did not look at her as if she were invisible. The largest one watched her from beside the door, frost melting from his silver-white fur, his moonlit eyes too intelligent, too aware. The other 5 dragged themselves closer to the stove, not in chaos, not in fear, but in a strange formation, as though even half-frozen they remembered discipline. Emily saw it then, each wolf carried a mark in its fur, faint beneath ice, a pale crescent near the shoulder. Royal markings, if the old stories were true. Her stomach tightened. Royal wolves did not come to border cabins. Royal wolves had guards, riders, healers, entire courts waiting with lanterns and commands. They did not beg a scentless Omega for shelter. A sudden gust struck the windows, and somewhere far off, beyond the pines, a horn sounded once from the direction of Frostpine Hall. Emily went still. The pack was searching the storm. Maybe for missing guests. Maybe for rogues. Maybe, by morning, for her. The smallest wolf whimpered again, and fear lost its argument. Emily pulled every blanket from her narrow bed, wrapped it gently around the shivering body, and reached for the pouch of winter herbs hanging by the stove. I do not know who you are, she said softly, placing the kettle over the flame, but nobody freezes outside my door while I still have warmth to share. At those words, the largest wolf lowered his head until his brow touched the floorboards, and beneath his frozen fur, a hidden crown-shaped mark began to glow. The crown-shaped mark glowed once, then faded beneath the melting frost, as if it had never been there at all. Emily stared at the largest wolf, her breath caught halfway in her chest, waiting for the fear to rise and take over. It should have. Any sensible Omega would have opened the door again, pointed them back into the storm, and prayed the pack never learned what had happened. But sensible choices had never been the same as right ones, and Emily had spent too many years watching powerful wolves call cruelty wisdom. She tightened her shawl around her shoulders and turned back to the stove. The kettle had begun to tremble, whispering steam into the silver-lit room. She poured hot water over crushed winter mint, pine bark, and a pinch of dried moon root, the last of what she had saved for herself in case the cold season turned harsh. It already had. Outside, the storm pressed against the cabin like a hand over a mouth. The wind did not simply blow through the trees. It circled. It listened. Every few seconds, the walls creaked inward, and the candles bent toward the windows, their flames thin and pale, as if something beyond the glass was pulling the light out of them. Emily carried the warm bowl to the smallest wolf first. Its eyes opened, cloudy with exhaustion, and it tried to lift its head. She touched 2 fingers gently to its muzzle. No, she said softly. You do not need to prove anything here. The word surprised her. They sounded like something she had always needed someone to say to her. One by one, she checked the others. The second wolf's front leg was stiff from the cold, so she wrapped it in a strip torn from her cleanest sheet. The third had ice clumped along its shoulder, and beneath it she found a silver arrowhead charm tangled in the fur, not piercing, but enchanted, freezing everything it touched. Emily swallowed hard and set it aside with iron tongs. The fourth breathed in uneven shivers until she rubbed warmed oil along its chest. The fifth could not make a sound when it opened its mouth, only a faint breath, like a song stolen before it could begin. The sixth, the largest, never took his eyes off her. Not suspiciously. Not hungrily. Watchfully. As if he had been sent to remember her face. When Emily stepped back, she realized the wolves had not collapsed randomly around the stove. They had formed a circle. 6 bodies, 6 points, all facing inward toward the center of the cabin, where nothing stood but a patch of empty floorboards glowing faintly under the silver candlelight. Her skin prickled. "What are you protecting?" she whispered. The largest wolf lowered his gaze to the floor. A sound rose then from the forbidden forest, deep and distant, not quite a howl, not quite a cry. The 6 wolves lifted their heads at once. Emily felt it pass through her bones, a lonely call filled with winter, command, and pain held back for far too long. Miles of forest separated her cabin from the royal road, but in that sound, she felt someone searching. Someone powerful. Someone running out of time. Then the empty space inside the wolf's circle flickered, and for half a second, Emily saw the shape of a man made of moonlight kneeling on her floor, one hand pressed over his heart. His silver eyes met hers. The vision vanished. Emily stumbled back, knocking the bowl from the table, and at that exact moment, 3 hard knocks struck her front door from the outside. A man's voice cut through the storm. "Emily Carter, open this door in the name of Frostpine Pack." Emily did not answer at first. The 3 knocks had not sounded like a neighbor asking for help. They sounded like a verdict arriving early. The 6 wolves went utterly still behind her, their bodies low around the glowing patch of floor, their eyes fixed on the door as if they understood every word spoken beyond it. Emily moved carefully, stepping over the fallen bowl, pressing one hand to the latch without opening it. "Who is there?" she asked, though she already knew. Tyler Graves stood on her porch with the storm wrapped around him, his voice sharp with authority he had never earned through kindness. "You know who it is. Open the door." Behind him, another voice cut through the wind, colder than the snow itself. "Do not make this worse, Emily." Marlene Carter. Of course she had come. Emily closed her eyes for half a second. She could picture them perfectly, Tyler in his dark winter coat, Marlene with her pale hair pinned neat despite the storm, 2 or 3 Frostpine patrol wolves standing behind them with lanterns raised high. They had probably followed the tracks from the tree line, 6 sets of paw prints leading to the one place nobody respectable ever visited. Her place. The cabin at the edge. The mistake at the border. "I am not feeling well," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I will report to the hall in the morning." Tyler laughed once, without warmth. "You will report now." The latch trembled beneath his hand from the other side. Emily turned and looked back. The smallest wolf had curled beneath the blanket, breathing easier now, but still weak. The voiceless one rested its head against the floor, watching her with quiet trust. The largest wolf rose halfway, not in threat, but in warning, and the crown-shaped mark beneath his fur gave one faint pulse of light. Emily suddenly understood that opening the door would not only expose them. It would break whatever fragile warmth had begun to gather inside the room. So she slid the iron bolt across the door. The sound was small, but in the silence that followed, it felt enormous. "Emily," Marlene said, her tone turning smooth and dangerous in the way adults used when they wanted cruelty to sound like concern, "have you taken something into this house?" Emily looked at the blankets on the floor, the herbs scattered across the table, the silver candles trembling in their holders. She thought about every winter she had spent serving people who would not have crossed the yard to check if she was cold. She thought about the smallest wolf's eyes when she opened the door. She thought about the moonlit man she had seen for half a heartbeat, kneeling as if his soul had been lost and somehow found its way to her floor. "I took in someone freezing," Emily said. "That is all." Tyler's voice hardened. "Rogue wolves are not someone." Something in Emily's chest lifted then, quiet but unbreakable. "They were at my door," she replied. "They asked for mercy." The wind fell silent for one impossible second. Then, from inside the circle of 6 wolves, the empty patch of floor glowed brighter, and a deep male voice, distant yet clear, whispered through the cabin, "And mercy has answered what power could not." The voice moved through the cabin like warmth moving through frozen hands. It was low, steady, and impossible to place, not coming from the walls, not from the stove, not from any living throat Emily could see. The 6 wolves lowered their heads at once, and the silver candles bent toward the empty circle between them as if bowing to an unseen king. Emily stood with her back to the locked door, her hand still resting on the iron bolt, and felt the old version of herself begging her to be quiet. Be useful. Be small. Survive until morning. But another part of her had awakened with those 3 words carved into snow. "Let us in." Outside, Tyler struck the door with the side of his fist, hard enough to rattle the hinges. "Who is speaking in there?" he demanded. "Open this door now." Marlene's voice followed, sharper than before. "She has always had strange little habits. Talking to shadows. Keeping herbs. Wandering near the forbidden forest. I warned your father she would bring shame on this house." Shame. Emily almost smiled, though there was no happiness in it. Shame had been the blanket Marlene wrapped around every act of kindness Emily tried to keep alive. If Emily fed a stray dog, it was weakness. If she helped an elderly servant carry water, it was desperation for praise. If she saved coins to buy medicine for a feverish child, it was foolishness, because no one would do the same for her. The largest wolf stepped closer, placing himself beside Emily rather than behind her. Up close, he was enormous, his shoulder nearly level with her waist, his fur thawing from white ice into deep silver beneath the firelight. His crown mark pulsed again, and this time Emily felt it answer somewhere beneath her ribs. Not pain. Not fear. Recognition. The cabin floor shimmered. For a breath, she saw the moonlit man again, clearer than before. Tall. Dark-haired. Kneeling inside a circle of pale light, one hand pressed over his heart, his silver eyes locked on hers with quiet urgency. "Do not let them take the wolves," his voice whispered, not to command her, but to ask. "They are all that remains between me and the winter curse." Then the vision flickered away. Emily's mouth went dry. Royal storms. Crown marks. 6 wolves moving like soldiers. A hidden man calling from miles away. Every old tale she had heard as a child returned in pieces, stories about Alpha King Adrian Blackwood, the ruler of the Northern Territories, whose palace had gone silent 3 nights ago when unnatural snow swallowed the royal road. Frostpine had spoken of it as gossip over dinner. Emily had listened while carrying plates. They said the king was proud, cold, untouchable. They said no curse could reach someone that powerful. But the wolves on her floor were shivering beneath her blankets, and power had not saved them. Tyler's voice rose again. "Last warning, Emily. Step away from the door, or I will have the patrol remove it." The smallest wolf made a soft sound, and Emily looked down at the blanket wrapped around its trembling body. In that moment, the choice became simple. Not easy. Simple. She lifted the wooden bar from beside the stove and set it across the door brackets, reinforcing the bolt. Then she turned toward the wolves, picked up the bowl of warm moonroot tea with both hands, and knelt in the silver circle. "Then we will not give them the door," she whispered. "We will give them a reason to fear what kindness can wake." The moment Emily knelt inside the silver circle, the cabin stopped feeling like a cabin. The narrow room, with its crooked shelves and smoke-dark beams, seemed to stretch into something older, wider, quieter than any place she had ever stood. The stove still glowed. The storm still pressed against the windows. Tyler still shouted beyond the door, and Marlene still muttered warnings to the patrol, but their voices thinned until they sounded miles away. All Emily could hear was the breathing of the 6 wolves and the steady beat of her own heart. She set the bowl of moonroot tea on the floorboards between them. Steam curled upward, silver instead of white. One by one, the wolves leaned closer, not to drink, but to breathe it in. The smallest wolf shivered beneath its blanket, and Emily reached for it without thinking. Her palm settled gently over the mark near its shoulder. Cold rushed into her fingers so sharply she nearly pulled back, but she forced herself to stay. "You came to my door," she whispered. "So stay with me." A soft light bloomed beneath her hand. It was not bright enough to hurt the eyes. It was the color of moonlight on fresh snow, gentle and steady, spreading through the wolf's fur like dawn finding a frozen field. The smallest wolf breathed once, then again, deeper this time, and the pale mark on its shoulder opened like a crescent moon. Outside, Tyler went silent. Emily felt the others watching. The mended leg of the second wolf straightened. The enchanted frost around the third loosened and fell away in harmless glitter. The fourth wolf's breathing became calm. The fifth lifted its head, and for the first time, a low, beautiful note trembled from its throat. Not a howl of threat. A song of return. The largest wolf stepped into the center of the circle and bowed so low his crown mark touched the glowing floor. The cabin answered. Every candle rose from its holder, hovering in the air, silver flames steady despite the storm. Emily gasped, but she did not move. The floorboards beneath her knees became transparent with light, and far away, beyond Frostpine, beyond the forbidden forest, beyond 7 miles of snow-covered Royal Road, she saw a palace trapped in ice. Its towers were black against the sky. Its gates were sealed by frost. In the highest chamber, a man sat motionless on a stone floor, his dark hair falling over his brow, his broad shoulders wrapped in a cloak rimmed with ice. 6 silver threads stretched from his chest into the darkness, frayed almost to nothing. Then Emily's light touched them. The man inhaled. His eyes opened. Silver. Awake. Alive. The storm around Frostpine cracked apart with a sound like a frozen lake remembering spring. Tyler shouted something from the porch, but the words no longer mattered. The 6 wolves rose together, no longer shaking, no longer lost, and turned toward the door as if listening to a command Emily could not hear. Then the distant voice filled the cabin again, stronger now, no longer a whisper. "Omega of Frostpine," it said, each word carrying the weight of a crown, "hold the door a little longer. I am coming." Emily did not know how long a little longer was supposed to last when an alpha king was crossing 7 miles of cursed winter to reach her. It felt like a prayer measured in heartbeats. The silver glow faded from the floor, but it did not leave her completely. It settled beneath her skin, quiet and warm, like a secret the cold could not touch. Around her, the 6 wolves stood taller now, their fur no longer stiff with ice, their eyes clear and bright. The smallest one pressed its head against Emily's knee, and the tenderness of that small gesture nearly undid her. Nobody in Frostpine had ever leaned on her as if she could be strong enough to hold them. Outside, Tyler's patience finally broke into fear. "Something is happening in there," he said, his voice no longer proud, only uncertain. "Move aside. We are opening it." The wooden bar across the door trembled as someone tested it from the other side. Emily rose slowly, her legs unsteady, but her spine straight. She crossed the room and placed both hands against the door, not to keep it shut by force, but to remind herself she had chosen this. "You do not need to be afraid," she called through the wood. Marlene answered with a sharp laugh. "Listen to yourself. A forgotten Omega sheltering unknown wolves, glowing candles, strange voices, and now you speak as if you are the one in charge." For once, Emily did not flinch. The words passed over her like snow against glass. Then the world outside changed. The storm, which had screamed for hours, stopped all at once. The silence was so complete that Emily could hear snow sliding from the roof in soft sheets. Beyond the door, lantern chains jingled. A patrol wolf whispered, "What is that?" Another answered, barely breathing, "Royal scent." The 6 wolves inside the cabin lifted their heads as one. Their tails lowered in respect. The crown mark on the largest wolf shone bright enough to cast silver light beneath the door. Then, far out in the dark, came the sound of footsteps in snow. Slow. Measured. Unhurried. Each step seemed to press command into the frozen earth. Emily felt it before she understood it, a presence moving through the woods that made the pines straighten and the moon break through the clouds. No carriage wheels. No horns. No army. Just one man crossing the white clearing toward her cabin as if the storm itself had opened a road for him. Tyler spoke first, but his voice had thinned. "Your Majesty." The title struck the night like a bell. Emily's hands slipped from the door. The largest wolf stepped beside her again, his shoulder brushing her skirt, and for the first time she sensed not only gratitude from him, but loyalty. Not to her rank. Not to her bloodline. To her choice. Outside, Marlene's voice softened into panic disguised as politeness. "Alpha King Adrian, we had no knowledge that these creatures were connected to the crown. This Omega acted without permission. We were only trying to protect Frostpine law." A pause followed. Then a man's voice answered, calm and deep, no longer distant, no longer carried through magic, but standing on her porch. "If your law teaches you to close a door on the freezing, then your law has forgotten the moon." Emily's breath left her. The bolt glowed beneath her hand and slid open by itself. The wooden bar lifted as gently as if moved by invisible hands and settled on the floor without a sound. The door swung inward. Cold moonlight spilled across the cabin, and there he stood, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood, tall beneath a black winter cloak, dark hair touched with snow, silver eyes fixed not on the wolves, not on Tyler, not on Marlene, but on Emily. 4. One impossible moment, the entire pack territory seemed to hold its breath. Then the 6 wolves bowed behind her, and the king stepped over the threshold. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood stepped into Emily Carter's cabin, and the room changed around him. Not because he raised his voice. Not because he demanded anything. He simply entered, and every shadow seemed to remember who ruled the north. Snow melted from the hem of his black cloak before it touched the floor. The silver candles lowered gently back into their holders. The 6 wolves remained bowed behind Emily, their heads down, their breath calm now, their bodies no longer shaking beneath the blankets she had wrapped around them with hands the pack had called useless. Emily stood very still beside the open door, her hair loosened from the storm, her dress damp at the sleeves, her fingers stained with herbs and moonroot tea. She expected the king to look past her. Important men always did. Tyler had done it for years. Marlene had done it with every command, every correction, every cold little smile. But Adrian looked at Emily as if the entire cursed winter had ended at her feet. "Your Majesty," Tyler said quickly from the porch, dropping to one knee so fast his lantern swung wildly in his hand. Behind him, the patrol followed. Marlene lowered herself last, her expression tight with the effort of appearing innocent. "We are honored by your presence. We were only enforcing Frostpine's safety law." The Omega refused to obey. Adrian did not turn around. His eyes remained on the torn sheet bandage Emily had tied around the second wolf's leg, on the blanket around the smallest one, on the bowl of herbs cooling near the silver circle. "Did she?" he asked quietly. Tyler swallowed. She hid unidentified wolves from the pack. Adrian's gaze moved to the largest wolf, and something unspoken passed between them. Then the king said, "These are not unidentified wolves." The air thickened. The 6 wolves lifted their heads. One by one, their forms shimmered with moonlight, not frighteningly, not violently, but like frost becoming mist beneath morning sun. Where wolves had stood, 6 human figures now knelt in the cabin. Wrapped in silver cloaks of light that settled into simple winter garments. 5 were royal guardians, pale and exhausted but alive. The smallest was younger than the rest, with silver eyes like Adrian's and a gentle face still marked by the cold. A soft gasp passed through the patrol. Adrian finally turned toward the porch. "This is Prince Caleb Blackwood, my younger brother. These 5 are the royal frost guard sworn to protect him. 3 nights ago, a winter curse separated them from my soul line and drove them into the forbidden forest. Every royal outpost was ordered to search. Every pack was ordered to shelter any wolf bearing a crescent mark." Tyler's face went colorless. Marlene's hands tightened in her skirt. Emily felt the world tilt beneath her. The order had never reached her. Or perhaps it had, and no one had thought the cabin at the edge deserved to know. Adrian's voice stayed calm, which somehow made it heavier. "Frostpine held a celebration while my family froze within walking distance of your fires." No one answered. Then Marlene lifted her chin, trying one final time to save the story she had built around Emily. "Your Majesty, Emily has always been unusual. Her scent is weak. Her place in the pack is uncertain. She may not have understood the danger." Emily looked down, old shame rising by habit. Before it could settle, Adrian crossed the room and stopped before her. He removed his cloak and placed it carefully around her shoulders, warm from his journey despite the snow. "She understood more than all of you," he said. "She understood that a door can be a law, and mercy can be a crown." Emily's throat tightened. Prince Caleb rose unsteadily and bowed to her, not as a child thanking a servant, but as royalty honoring an equal. "You heard us," he said softly. Everyone else heard only the storm. At those words, the pale skin of Emily's wrist warmed beneath Adrian's cloak. A crescent mark appeared there, silver and delicate, glowing with the same light as the healed wolves. Adrian saw it. For the first time, his controlled expression broke, not into shock, but wonder. Outside, the pack watched in silence as their forgotten Omega lifted her marked wrist, and the Alpha King bowed his head to her. For a long moment, no one moved. Snow drifted through the open doorway in soft white spirals, but the cabin no longer felt cold. Emily stood beneath Adrian Blackwood's cloak with the silver crescent glowing on her wrist, and the silence around her was different from every silence she had ever known. This was not the silence of being ignored. This was the silence of witnesses realizing they had been wrong. Tyler remained on one knee outside the door, his head lowered, his pride folding under the weight of what he had almost done. Marlene stared at the mark on Emily's wrist as if it were a sentence written by the moon itself. Emily expected satisfaction to rise in her chest. Instead, all she felt was tired, tender, and strangely calm. She looked at the 6 figures she had sheltered, at Prince Caleb standing safely beside the royal frost guard, at the blankets on the floor and the herbs scattered across the table, and she understood that the night had not changed her kindness. It had only revealed what that kindness was worth. Adrian reached for her hand, then paused, waiting for permission in front of the entire pack. That small hesitation did more to steady Emily than any royal decree could have. She placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, his touch careful, and the crescent mark brightened between them. A soft sound passed through Frostpine, not a gasp of fear, but a breath of recognition. The mate bond did not strike like thunder. It unfolded like dawn. Gentle. Certain. Impossible to deny. Adrian bowed his head over her hand, and when he spoke, his voice carried beyond the porch, across the snow, and into the trees where the storm had finally gone still. Emily Carter did not know their names. She did not know their rank. She did not know that saving them would call me here. She opened her door because they were cold, and because her heart knew a law older than any pack command. His eyes moved to Tyler, then to Marlene, but his voice never sharpened. It did not need to. From this night forward, no one in Frostpine will call mercy weakness again. Marlene lowered her gaze. Tyler whispered an apology so quietly the wind almost took it, but Emily heard it. For once, she did not need to answer. Prince Caleb stepped forward and placed the folded blanket carefully into her arms. "You gave this to me when I had nothing to offer you," he said. "I would like you to keep it, so you remember that someone royal once needed the warmth of an Omega's home." Emily smiled through the ache in her throat. Outside, the first pale light of morning touched the tops of the pines. The curse that had sealed the royal road began to melt in silver streams, and far away, bells rang from the direction of the Blackwood Palace, clear and bright across 7 miles of snow. Adrian turned back to Emily. In his face, she saw power, yes, but also gratitude, restraint, and a loneliness that looked strangely familiar. "Come with me when you are ready," he said. "Not as a servant. Not as a debt. As the one who called my soul home." Emily looked once at the cabin that had held all her quiet years, then at the open door where 6 frozen wolves had begged for shelter and changed everything that followed. She tightened the cloak around her shoulders, lifted her marked wrist into the morning light, and stepped across the threshold beside the Alpha King. Behind her, Frostpine bowed. Before her, the snow opened into a road of silver.